Hello everyone, this is Paul Norell. I'd like to share a run through today of a great board game called Antike II. Antike II is the strategy board game designed by Mac Geertz and published by Rio Grande Games. I was really thrilled to find this game had been re-released this year. I've been wanting to get hold of it for some time, but the first edition has been out of print for a while, and as a kind of consolation I bought the two-player expansion game Antike Duelum. Happily now, Antike II is now available, and that's what I'm going to be focused on here. Now, before we get underway, I'd like to show you my player mat. I love doing these for quite a lot of my games. They're very handy for keeping pieces tidily arranged, and if you're like me and you hate counters that are all over the place, then these are for you. The mats have spaces for the playing pieces, markers, city tiles, and of course the all-important personage cards which you collect during the game to earn victory points. Here's the setup for the black player, who happens to be Germania in this game. And as you can see, they start with 12 legions, 13 fleets, 3 different types of city, 3 of each resource, gold, marble and iron, and 5 markers which they will use to indicate the achievements in know-how. The 5 mats are set up around the edge of the board with player order. Now this is determined randomly. Here I'm going from the bottom left with Carthage in grey as the first player, then Rome, which is red. I always think of Rome being red for some reason. Then Hellas, or Greece, in blue. This was the Macedonian kingdom of the Antigone dynasty, who were the successors of Alexander the Great. Egypt under the Ptolemies, another of Alexander's successors, there in green. And finally Germania in black. The temples, resources and money tokens are sorted for use as the game progresses. You'll notice that Germania has a special card. This is the Bologna card and is given to the player who is last in the turn order. Now what this means is that whenever the player currently holding the card executes an arming action, they must do 2 things. Now this is not optional, it's compulsory. First, they must arm 1 extra military unit of their choice, either a legion or a fleet, and secondly, they must pass the card on to the player to his right. So that would be Egypt in this case. So in effect, as the game turn order proceeds in a clockwise direction, the Bologna card is passed in a counterclockwise direction. Now, something else to note here is that the victory goal changes depending on the number of players. So in the full 6-player game, as indicated by the Roman numeral inside the wreath here, the winner will be the first to gain 7 victory points. As this game has 5 players, the target is increased to 8 victory points, and all the way up to 10 victory points if you play the 3-player version. Now, perhaps the most famous trademark of Mac Geertz's games is the rondel, which has become something of a gaming icon since its first appearance. A player can begin on any one of the 8 segments, and each round has got to move in a clockwise direction. Now, they can move from 1 to 3 spaces for free, but for each additional space they wish to move in a single round, they have to pay 1 coin. You can see how each resource is directly opposite to the function it's used for. Iron is used to build fleets and legions, marble to build temples, and gold to achieve scientia or technological advances. There are also 2 movement actions on the rondel. The technological advances, which you need gold resources to acquire, are displayed on the bottom left-hand corner of the board. The figure to the left of the slash is the amount to be paid by the first person to acquire the know-how, for which they, and they alone, gain a victory point and the appropriate personage card. The figure to the right of the slash is the amount to be paid by any subsequent player, and although it's cheaper, those players do not gain the victory point or the card. Now, with the 6 advances stacked one on top of the other, the top advance has to be acquired before the bottom one. Mercatura and Commercium allow you to exchange resources at different rates. Metallum and Moneta allow you to gain 1 or 2 extra resources, respectively. And Regnum and Res Publica give all your cities a defense bonus of initially +1 and later +2. Finally, the personage cards. Now, these are in 5 sets, and you gain 1 card each time you control either a multiple of 5 cities, build multiples of 3 temples, control the 7 seas, be the first to gain a technological advance, or destroy an opponent's temple. Now, here's the board set up for the 5-player scenario of Mare Nostrum, which focuses on the central Mediterranean area. Now, the flip side of the board, by the way, features a slightly different map where the eastern provinces are more heavily featured. So in effect, you have 2 gaming options in the one box. Now, it's important to remember that the setup for each player varies according to the number of players. Here is Germania with its 3 starting cities, 1 each of gold, marble and iron. Rome, Carthage, Egypt, and finally Hellas or Greece. One final thing, I forgot to place the 3 starting temples, which are all in neutral spaces and provide an early incentive for players to gain an easy victory point for destroying a temple. Now, I say easy, but it does require 3 legions to accomplish this, so it's not something that happens quickly. In the 5-player game, the temples are at Toletum, Sirmium, sorry for the reflected glare there, and Melitene. So let's get underway. Now, I don't propose to demonstrate any skillful play here. I've only played this 2 or 3 times. I just want to show you how it plays and some of the options you can choose. The most important thing to remember about Antique is that once you've gained a victory point, you can't lose it. So if you get a victory point for controlling 10 cities and then lose one to another player, you don't lose that victory point. The game, in effect, becomes a race to gather and expend resources. Now, this raises a key question about strategy, which is, what resources do you go for? Do you want as many temples as you can build? Do you want to expand and conquer cities? Or do you want to gain technological advances? Of course you want to do all 3, but how you prioritize is the key thing. Now, you can see that in the first round, all players have decided to go for a marble resource. This is so that they can build a temple early on and so gain additional resources. So you'll see here that Egypt has taken a marble resource and also 1 coin. Now, you get a coin every time you gather a resource, and this is crucial because coins can be freely used at any time to substitute for any other resource. And, as I mentioned earlier, you need a coin to spend for every additional space over 3 that you move on the rondel in a single round. Now, the second round, well, no one has enough gold to spend on advances, and there are no troops on the board to move, so all players go for the iron resource and additional coin. Round 3, and now each player has enough to build 1 temple. The cost is 5 marble, and each player has 4 marble and 2 coins, so that they can go ahead. Now comes the next big question. What city are you going to place it in? In other words, which resource do you want to increase most rapidly? For the sake of this playthrough, let's assume, for example, that Carthage is wanting to build up its armed forces and expand its empire into Spain, the Mediterranean, and perhaps challenge Egypt. So he's going to put a temple, to Baal, of course, in the iron-producing city of Caesarea. Rome decides to go for gold and builds a temple to Jupiter in the capital. The Greeks go for a marble city at Ephesus, and the Egyptians do the same at Alexandria. And the Germanic tribes go for iron at Colonia Agrippina. Each city with a temple will now produce 3 of that resource instead of 1. However, there are other things to consider when placing temples other than increased resources. Temples also allow you to place 3 recruits in a city instead of 1, and in addition gives the city a defense value of 3 instead of 1. So you could decide to place a temple in a strategically sensitive region in order to raise troops quickly to strike an opponent before he can muster sufficient defense. Now, while you don't want to lose the temple, of course, remember that it has a defense of 3 just on its own, so it can be an offensive threat. Alternatively, you might choose to keep your temples out of harm's way, where any troops that are recruited can be used as a reserve. The choice is up to you. Everyone goes for gold this round, but Rome has been a bit canny, because by placing the temple at the capital, they now get 3 gold resources instead of 1. So Rome is already looking to maybe picking up technological advances at some point. Now, the first few rounds have been a bit like follow the leader. It's sort of something like a marathon race where the pack stays together, everybody watching to see what their rival is going to do. Now, the time now for some divergence in strategy as we get some troops on the board. What units will be raised and where will they be deployed? Arming costs 2 iron resources for each unit. So here Carthage spends its 4 iron and 2 coins. Remember, coins can be substituted for any resource, and builds 3 fleets, placing them at Caesarea, Carthage, and Takape. Now, all 3 units could have been placed in Caesarea because there's a temple there, but the player decides to garrison each city with 1 unit. Rome decides to be a bit more conservative, only spending 4 iron to build 2 legions, both of which are placed at Rome itself. The Greeks also spend 4 iron, putting a fleet and a legion at Ephesus. Egypt does likewise, with a fleet at Alexandria and Cyrene. Now, remember, Germania has to use the Bologna card during this phase, so they pay 4 iron, but can raise 1 extra unit, which they put 1 in each city. And then the Bologna card is transferred to the player on the right, which in this case is Egypt. Now, in order to found cities, you need 1 of each resource, or coins, so all players are going to stop on marble to gather enough to get some cities. Now, at this point, Greece and Egypt benefit from their marble cities with temples because their resources are tripled. Time now to found some cities. Now, each player started with 3, so 2 more and they get a victory point and a king personage card. Now at this point Carthage is probably regretting taking the extra fleet unit because, as you can see, there's only enough resources and coin to found one city. So there's a lesson to be learned here, not to raise more troops than you need for each round. Carthage decides another marble city would be good, so moves a fleet from Caesarea to Valentia, pays 1 gold, 1 marble and 1 coin in place of iron, and places a marble token city. Rome has enough for 2 cities, so moves both its legions, spends 2 gold, 1 marble and 3 coins, and puts a marble city at Mediolanum and an iron city at Aquileia. And because he now controls 5 cities, Rome gains a victory point and a king personage card, which in this case is Agamemnon. Greece moves its legion to Italia and its fleet to Athens to get a gold city and an iron city. Now, the fleet could have gone to Knossos to forestall Egypt, but that would have meant 2 iron cities, and I think at this stage it's probably better to spread the resources. 5 cities for the Greeks, a victory point, and a king personage card, which is Queen Zenobia. Now the Egyptian fleet now creates 2 cities, an iron city at Knossos and a gold city at Paphos. They also earn a victory point and pick up a card which very appropriately is Cleopatra. Now after 7 rounds, all players except Carthage control 5 cities and have a victory point. Now you'll notice another little game mechanic. If a player has 2 or less victory points, he gets the defensive bonus of +1 on all his cities, which acts as a disincentive to players attacking each other too early on. I think this is quite a good feature. And Germania also picks up a victory point for 5 cities, and at this point I'm going to pause and come back when the game is further advanced. So, see you soon. Well, we're back after several more rounds played, and as you can see there's been some advance on the victory point track. Now note that as soon as a player gains 3 victory points, he loses that defense bonus for his cities, which I mentioned earlier. Now you can see from this view that Carthage has made considerable expansion right across Spain to North Africa, Leptis Magna. It was the first power to own 10 cities and gain control of the 7 seas. So you can see it's jumped up to join the leaders. The sea spaces marked by a ship icon are worth 2, so by occupying 2 of these, Carthage has gained control of the required spaces using only 5 fleets, for which he gets a navigator card and a victory point. Rome's development has been a little more compact, concentrating its forces near the capital, and you can see a second temple built here at Massilia, the modern Marseille. Germania is also building up its forces, and you can see there is a definite confrontation looming with Rome. Now Germania has also scored a victory point for destroying the neutral temple at Sirmium, and has created an iron resource city there. It costs 3 units to take the temple, so it's not something you want to do if enemy units are close by, but it does keep them in the race, albeit in last place at the moment. Now, moving now to the eastern Mediterranean, where interesting things have been going on. The Antigonids, Greece, and the Ptolemies in Egypt have been keeping a watchful eye on each other's progress. You can see the opposing naval forces deployed on the opposite coastlines. Doubtless they will both be looking to try and gain naval supremacy at some point. The Greeks have expanded to Sparta and up the Adriatic coast, and get a victory point for having 3 temples. The Egyptians have also expanded and also have 3 temples. So these two powers are going neck and neck at the moment. Time to look at the Scientia display now, and you can see that players have been acquiring some useful technological advances. Rome has got Metallum, so gains an extra resource every time they take that action. And they also have Strata, which allows legions to move 2 spaces instead of 1. Egypt gains a victory point and a card for Mercatura, and you'll see that it also has Navigatio, but only paid the cheaper price for it and doesn't get the victory point or card. Nevertheless, they wanted it because it's going to allow the fleets extra mobility. Now, here's an interesting situation. You can see that Carthage has a legion in each of the spaces adjoining Toletum, where there's a neutral temple. A tempting target, isn't it? But should he go for it? If he does, he'll get a victory point, but will also lose all 3 legions, leaving Spain wide open. Now, Carthage also doesn't have any iron left for replacements, so it would be a while before these losses are made up. So I think he'll wait a while before moving into Toletum, because there is no immediate threat from elsewhere. Yet. An important strategy to bear in mind here is that you want to avoid committing yourself to combat without having sufficient iron reserves to replace those forces as soon as possible. You can see that Carthage has no iron at present, but if it did, then it could follow a combat round with an arming round and get back those units that were lost, and so avoid leaving spaces exposed to a counterattack by an opponent. Now, you can see that Germania has got rather left behind, so they're going to do something about this, and they're going to declare war on Rome. So first of all, Germania brings in 5 units to match the Roman defense at Aquileia, which is 3 for the temple and 2 for the legions. And having gained a victory point for destroying the temple and taking control of the city, Germania also founds another city at Lutetia and grabs Tomis from the Greeks, which will be a 1-for-1 trade-off. So Germania has now gained 2 victory points this round and is up with the leaders once again. And that second victory point, by the way, was because it now controls 10 cities. Things are hotting up in the west now. Rome is going to take a big gamble here and declare war on both Germania and Carthage. So first of all, it gathers legions at Massilia and fleets in Rome. Now, this is a bold move because it will leave temples exposed, but what Rome is gambling on is that it will be able to reinforce those cities before the opponents can counterattack. Let's see what happens. Now, Rome moves 5 legions to Colonia Agrippina to match the 3 for the temple and 2 for the Germanic garrison. So the temple is taken out and the city converted straight away to a Roman one. By the way, when you conquer cities, they are immediately converted. You don't have to pay anything like you do for neutral spaces. 3 fleets attack the Carthaginian settlement at Corrales in Sardinia, while a legion and a fleet moves on Neapolis. Now, Rome picks up a victory point for the destroyed temple and has gained 3 cities. But Massilia is now pretty exposed to the Carthaginian forces massing in Spain for a counterattack. And this is always the danger. As soon as you attack an opponent, another player can take advantage of your temporary weakness. It looks all over for Massilia, but Carthage cannot get a movement action. It requires a move of 4 spaces on the rondel, and Carthage does not have a coin to pay for the extra space. Grrr, they say, in Carthaginian, of course. And in the meantime, Rome is able to get reinforcements into Massilia, to joyous cries of "Me Hercule" and "Di Immortales" and other such exclamations. I can still remember some of my schoolboy Latin. So Rome, despite having the fewest cities and surrounded by enemies, is doing pretty well, largely down to the fact that it has acquired 3 technological advances. Now meanwhile, back in the east, things are looking set for an almighty showdown between the Antigonids and the Ptolemies. Now the Greeks have acquired 6 temples, while the Egyptians have just had a massive arming action to recruit 8 units. Now they were able to do this because they have the commercium advance, which allows an exchange of resources at the rate of 3 to 2. So Ptolemy decided to throw in his marble reserves for additional iron. And that's where I'm going to leave this replay for now. Will Rome survive the onset of Carthaginians and German barbarians? Who will emerge victorious in the battle between Alexander's successors? I hope you've enjoyed this run-through of Antike II. A really great game. And thanks for watching.